You know that feeling around 2 a.m. when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you see someone on social media talking about their six-figure business? And you think, yeah, well, I'm working 60-hour weeks, I'm grinding, I'm hustling, so why aren't I where they are? You've probably heard it a million times by now, the whole hustle narrative. Work harder, wake up at 5 a.m., do a side hustle, do two side hustles. Every successful person grinds, right? Every billionaire is out there working 20-hour days, and if you're not doing the same, well, honestly, that's on you. Except, I spend way too much time thinking about money, about how people actually build it, and about why this narrative, this beautiful, motivating, absolutely exhausting narrative, is fundamentally, deeply wrong. My name's Synth because I've watched hundreds of people follow the hustle playbook to absolute burnout, while others seem to almost effortlessly build wealth that compounds, that lasts, that actually changes their lives. And the difference isn't what you think it is. The thing that nobody wants to admit because it's less sexy than a morning routine video or a "I made 10K last month" thumbnail is this. The people building real wealth aren't the ones working the hardest. They're the ones working the smartest. And more specifically, they've figured out something that the hustle culture never talks about, something that completely reframes how you should actually think about building money and financial security. Here's the wild part, though. Once you understand this one concept, once you see how this actually works, you can't unsee it. You start looking at successful people differently. You start seeing patterns that nobody else talks about, and you realize that maybe, just maybe, you've been playing the wrong game this whole time. So if you've ever felt like maybe you're doing something wrong, like maybe the grind isn't paying off the way it should, or if you're just curious about what actually moves the needle with wealth, stick around, because what we're about to talk about might actually change how you approach the next decade of your life. Let me paint a picture that I think you'll recognize. There's this person, let's call them Alex. Alex is smart, really smart, works as a mid-level manager at a tech company, makes decent money, but Alex is hungry, you know? Alex wants more. So Alex starts a side hustle. Maybe it's freelancing, maybe it's drop shipping, doesn't matter. Alex commits to working 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. every morning before the day job, then another 2-3 hours at night, plus the whole Saturday. Alex does this for 2 years, 2 solid years of work. And at the end of it, Alex has made it maybe $15,000 total. The side hustle takes up basically every hour of free time, relationships are strained, Alex hasn't slept more than 5-6 hours a night in months, and you know what the math looks like? Alex is making less per hour than the day job pays. But Alex keeps going, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to hustle. And Alex isn't lazy, Alex isn't unmotivated, Alex is doing exactly what the internet told them to do. Here's the frustrating part. The hustle narrative has weaponized guilt. It's turned hard work into a moral virtue and made it the only variable that matters. If you're not succeeding, you're not grinding hard enough. You don't want it bad enough. And it's not true. It's actually kind of destructive because it makes people blame themselves for having the wrong strategy. The real wealth builders figured out something different. They stopped conflating effort with progress, and that distinction is everything. So let me ask you something. If I told you that you could build substantial wealth without working significantly harder than you already do, you'd probably think I'm selling something. But there's actual economic logic here, and it's been true for literally centuries. Leverage is the difference between trading your hours for money and having your money work for you. I know that sounds generic financial advice, but here's why it actually matters and why most people miss it completely.
Let's go back to Alex. What if instead of trading 12-plus hours a week for $10 an hour in freelance work, Alex spent that time learning something that would increase his hourly rate at the day job? A certification, a new skill, something that made him promotable. That's leverage. Alex isn't trading time for money. Alex is trading capability for money. And capability scales. Here's a concrete example. I had a friend named Marcus who was a graphic designer doing what everyone told him to do, taking on more clients, working longer hours, increasing his rate from $40 to $50 to $60 an hour. But his income was still capped because he only had so many hours in a week. So Marcus did something different. He spent 6 months building templates, systems, and design frameworks that he could sell to other designers. Not a massive business, just a product. That product gave him leverage. Now he had clients and another income stream that didn't require more time. His earnings went from $60,000 to almost $110,000 a year, and he was actually working fewer hours. That's the difference. Hustle gets you from point A to point B through effort. Leverage gets you from point A to point C while sleeping. And here's what matters. Leverage isn't luck. It's about recognizing that there are different categories of wealth-building activity, and some have exponentially better returns on your time. So let me break down how I think about this, because this framework changed everything for me. There's basically 3 categories of work you can do with your time when it comes to building wealth. Most people, probably 95% of people trying to build wealth, focus entirely on the first category and ignore the other 2. Category 1 is linear work. That's trading your time for money, straight up. You work, you get paid. Work more, get paid more. It's straightforward. Side hustles, freelancing, most jobs live here. The problem, it has a ceiling. You only have so many hours. Even at $500 an hour, there's only so much you can make. When you stop working, the money stops. Category 2 is scalable work. This is where you do the work once and it pays you multiple times. A digital product, an online course, a SaaS tool, a YouTube channel. Anything that generates value without requiring your direct time. The magic is that it breaks the time ceiling. You spend time building it, but then it generates revenue without you actively trading hours. Here's what's important, though. Scalable work usually requires a period of linear work first. You're trading time to build the asset. The difference is you know it'll pay dividends later. Category 3 is ownership and passive investments. This is what rich people have always known about. You have money, and that money works for you. Stocks, real estate, business ownership. These generate wealth while you're asleep. You're on vacation. You're living your life. The money keeps working. Now, here's the real insight. Most wealthy people don't build wealth in just one category. They do a mix. They have stable linear income, they've built or invested in something scalable, and they have passive investments working. But the ratio is completely different from what the hustle narrative suggests. Instead of work more, grind harder, it should be optimize where your work is happening. Get stable income first, then shift focus towards scalable work and investing. Let money work for you. So you're probably already thinking some things, like, okay, this sounds good, but I don't have time to build a scalable business. I don't have money to invest. I'm barely keeping up with my regular job. And I get it. But there's something interesting happening in your brain right now. There's a psychological reason why the hustle narrative feels so right even when the results are disappointing. Hard work feels morally justified. It feels earned. When you work 70 hours a week, even with marginal progress, at least you did something. You can feel it. Your sacrifice feels real and tangible. And human psychology is deeply wired to connect effort with outcome.
The problem is that leverage doesn't always feel like work. Building an online course feels passive. Investing money feels almost lazy. It doesn't come with that visceral sensation of grinding. So our brains reject it as not real work. But here's the truth. The person working a smart job, spending 3 hours a week on a scalable project that will eventually generate $30,000 a year and investing $500 a month, is building wealth faster than someone grinding 80 hours a week on linear work. The math doesn't lie, but our emotions fight it because it doesn't feel as impressive. And that's the trap. Let me tell you about someone named Sarah, because her story illustrates this better than any principle I can state. Sarah is 28,
makes about $65,000 a year. Not particularly special, but thoughtful about where she puts her energy. Here's what Sarah does differently than Alex. Sarah keeps her job, it's fine, but she doesn't try to turn it into a hustle. Instead, Sarah takes $500 a month, money she could be spending on coffee and Uber, and puts it into a low-cost index fund. She does this consistently, not because it's exciting, but because she understands how wealth actually works. Sarah also spends about 3 hours a week on a side project. She's a project manager, so she creates templates, checklists, and frameworks that help other PMs. She sells these for $15 to $50 each. Most months, it's only a few $100s, but here's the key. The work is done once, and it keeps selling. By year 3, she's making about $15,000 a year from this thing. By year 5, it's $25,000, and she barely worked more for that progression because the product was already built. Meanwhile, her investments have been compounding at a 7% annual return, very reasonable. Her $500 a month investment over 10 years becomes about $80,000, sitting there working for her while she sleeps. Now step back. Sarah's total wealth position at 38 years old is conservatively around $150,000 to $200,000 in invested assets, plus the income-generating side project. Sarah didn't work 80 hours a week. Sarah worked maybe 8 to 10 hours extra a week beyond the regular job. But because those hours were leveraged, because they were directed towards scalable and investable activities, the compound effect is absolutely dramatic. Compare that to Alex, grinding for the same 10 years, making maybe $150,000 in total side hustle income. Alex is exhausted, no relationships, health probably isn't great, and Alex's net wealth position is probably not better than Sarah's, maybe worse, because Alex never invested. That's the difference leverage makes. So let's get practical, because this is where people usually check out. Okay, cool story, but how do I actually do this? I'm not a genius, I'm not an entrepreneur, I don't have startup capital. I'm not going to pretend there are easy answers, but there are some universal things that don't require you to be special. First, get your base income stable. Not necessarily high, but stable. It's your foundation. It's what allows you to invest. It's what gives you psychological stability to think long term. If you're constantly stressed about rent, it's hard to build a business or invest. Second, identify one scalable project aligned with what you know, not what's trending on TikTok. What do you actually know? What skill do you have? What problem have you solved that others are struggling with? The secret nobody tells you, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can create and sell something with $50 in tools and your existing knowledge. The barrier to entry is lower than ever. Third, start investing. Even $50 a month, even if it seems small, the compounding effect is real, and the longer you wait, the less time you have for the math to work for you. An index fund, a Roth IRA, real estate, the specific vehicle matters less than actually starting and sticking with it.
And finally, be patient. This is the hardest part. Patience isn't dramatic. It's not inspirational. Nobody makes a motivational video about waiting for compound growth. But the difference between starting to invest at 25 versus 35 is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. That matters. Here's what I think we need to talk about. The hustle narrative sells you a lie about what success looks like. Success, according to the narrative, is visible. It's exhausting. It's something you feel. You wake up at 5 a.m., you work until midnight, you're busy, you're grinding. That is success. But actual financial success, real wealth, it often looks kind of boring. It looks like someone who has a normal job, maybe works a few hours on a side project that's already established, puts money into investments consistently, and just lives their life. That person is probably building wealth faster than the person who's always crushing it and working on multiple ventures. And that's the real reframing that needs to happen.
Success isn't about visibility of effort. Success is about results. Results take time. Results come from leverage. Results come from the kind of consistent strategic effort that doesn't always feel like enough because it doesn't feel like anything. I know people who are absolutely crushing it financially, and you would never know it because they're not posting about it, they're not talking about it, they're just quietly building wealth, making smart decisions, and letting compound growth do the heavy lifting. Meanwhile, I know people who look super successful on social media. They're always talking about their hustle, their grind, their side businesses, and their net worth is probably negative because they're so caught up in appearing successful that they're not actually being successful. So the real question you have to ask yourself is, what are you actually trying to accomplish? Are you trying to feel successful? Are you trying to look successful? Or are you trying to be successful? Because those are different paths, and only one of them is sustainable. So, where does this leave us? I think if there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. The hustle narrative isn't wrong about hard work being important. Hard work is important, but hard work is a multiplier, not the foundation. The foundation is leverage. The foundation is direction. The foundation is understanding that there are different ways to deploy your effort, and some are exponentially more effective than others. You don't need to work harder. You probably need to work differently. And that's actually liberating when you think about it, because it means you're not stuck. You're not limited by your capacity to grind. You're limited only by your willingness to think strategically about how you build wealth. The people who look at this framework and think, okay, I need to stabilize my income, then build something scalable, then invest consistently, those people are going to look back in 10 or 15 years and be shocked at what they've built. Not because they worked harder than everyone else, but because they worked smarter, because they understood that wealth is built through leverage, not through sacrifice. And here's the thing. You're the right person to do this. You don't need permission. You don't need to be special, talented, or born into the right family. You just need to understand the game and play it the way it's actually designed to be played, not the way social media tells you to play it. So take that seriously. Think about where your effort is going today. Consider whether you're chasing the feeling of hustle or the reality of wealth. And then make one different choice, just one. One small shift toward leverage instead of just effort. That shift compounds. That choice is how wealth is actually built. Thanks for being here. This stuff matters, and I appreciate you thinking about it with me.